Yeah. Oh. Mhm. Okay, yeah, let's move on to the next topic of photolithography. Actually, I just cut down some slides, so probably what is shown here is slightly shorter than what you have in the USB stick. Okay, I think photolithography. So you learned the micro milling, and basically the practical size of structure you can produce with micro milling is around 10 or a couple of tens of micrometers. Okay, but by developing photolithography, actually people can produce structures even smaller than actually micro scale. Okay, so as recently Samsung Electronics, they use photolithography, but they use actually the EUV light to produce structure down to like 7 nanometers. Okay, and they made like NAND RAM with this technology. But actually, photolithography is not very uncommon, and you can really find the photolithography in everyday life. So you can see this. Okay. So basically, what you can realize here. Okay. So basically, when we are exposed to the sunlight all the time. Okay. So if you basically what we have here is basically photolithography. So what you have. So basically, your clothes normally covers your skin, okay, and then where is exposed now is burnt. This is basically the basic principle of photolithography, and you have to think about how we can make a very nice pattern using this process. So, for example, once you burn your skin for a long time, and what happens later, your skin will be peeled off, right? And that is basically lithography. The process. But the question is why your skin peeled off so inhomogeneously, while in the real pattern, we want to have a really, really nice homogeneous patterns. Think about why. For example, your skin is not really homogeneous, right? And also if you see, I mean, the boundary is not very clear because your clothes cannot really cover your skin very tightly, and also the light can diffuse laterally. So you have to consider all of such factors to have a very nice micro scale patterns. So this is kind of overview of photolithography. So basically what we have is, first of all, we need to have a certain photoresist. Okay, photoresist is material which reacts by the light source. Okay, but again, we want to make a pattern kind of locally. So we need to have like a mask. Okay, and then also we need to have a mask aligner where we want to put the mask at the desired location on your substrate. Okay, basically in the mask, what you have is you have some area which is transparent, and with some area which is blocked by. Normally, this transparent area is made by glass or quartz, and this the area which blocks light is made of mostly by chrome. Okay, so we need to have a photo mask. And then now we need to have a light source, okay, like sunlight we have. And then now we expose your substrate through this mask, okay? And then of course, partially where the light is exposed will be modified here in the photoresist layer. And normally after this step, we just remove this depending on the type of resist, either modified or unmodified area over this photoresist layer, and then we will have these patterns. Okay, so this is some advantages and disadvantages. So for example, now once this is kind of parallel patterning method, which is different from the micro milling that you have seen before. In the micro milling, basically what is that? These needles drill will just rest the scan over the area where you want to make patterns. But in the photolithography, once we have this mask, then basically you shine the light through the entire area of the mask at once. So this is a parallel process and high throughput. Okay, and then basically we can produce, as I mentioned before, very small structures. Okay, but practical resolution limit is around 1 micrometer using conventional photolithography method. Okay, and some disadvantages, again, the resolution is limited, okay, by the use of light and equipment. And then the equipment cost is pretty high. Okay, so, and then also you need to understand, so this is less accessible to chemistry and biologists. So I think that most of us here are working on like chemistry and bio applications. Okay, and then another thing is that not easily applied to curved surfaces. Okay, because you can see normally mask is hard material, so you cannot really make it curved. Okay. So, I mean, this is just a repetition of the important component in the photolithography. So we need to have a light, we need to have a mask, so we need to have a liner, so how you can put the mask onto this photoresist layer. Okay, and then also we need to have a photoresist. This is very important, like a skin. Depending on, some people skins are burnt better than the others, right? So I think we need to choose the right chemistry to react with the light, right? And then also the substrate which support this photoresist layer. So those are the important components you need to have for photolithography process. Okay, so this is the actual process. Okay, for photolithography. The first step is normally we need to spin coat the resist layer on the substrate. Normally, for most cases, people use silicone as substrate, but it's not. You don't have to use it. But for making like a microchips, they use silicone substrate mostly. Okay, and then now you put your substrate into your mask aligner, and then now you kind of put the mask at a certain location using the aligner. And then you shine light. And what happens is the resist layer where it is exposed to the light will be modified. Okay, either this is the resist chain is broken or it's cross-linked. In this case, if you use the SU8, this becomes negative photoresist. So in this case, this area was cross-linked. Okay, and then now unexposed area will be dissolved by putting your substrate into a developer, and we call this a development process. Okay, up to this point, normally we call this the photolithography. Okay, but for many cases, we are not using patterns in photoresist. Okay, we want to transfer the pattern in the photoresist down to your substrate, silicone material or some other materials. Okay, so in order to do this, I think we combine this photolithography step with the etching process. I think in the next talk, Dr. Sopo will talk about the etching process in more detail. Okay, and then after you remove this resist here, and then you will have the patterns. Okay, again, more detailed process. Okay, so before you put your substrate on, normally you need to dehydrate your substrate. Okay, so because if you have humidity in your resist and then or substrate, then that will affect the final outcome of your structures. Okay, and then again, we are not just spin coat your photoresist directly on the substrate. Normally, you use so-called adhesion promoter. Okay, so simply that is a very thin layer of liquid. So you spin coat that as well on the surface of substrate. And then which will enhance the adhesion between the photoresist to the silicone substrate. Okay, and then now you soft bake. The goal of soft bake is just to remove the solvent of the photoresist layer. Okay, and then partially like solidify this photoresist layer. And then now you do actual exposure process. And after exposure, now sometimes you do hard baking. Okay, and again, the goal is to remove more solvent, and then now you develop the weak regions of photoresist layer by putting your entire substrate into a developer. Okay, and then for many cases, after you complete the photolithography process, now you put your patterned substrate on hot plate for additional hard baking process. So by doing this, normally during the photolithography process, your resist layer is kind of modified. And then by this hard baking process, that modified part of resist can be cured, so that you have more like a durable patterns in your resist layer. Okay. Why is it important? Because now, if you want to go through the subsequent etching process or ion implantation process, then you want to have a more like a hard photoresist layer. Okay. So I think let's go one by one the important components. The first requirements we have for photolithography is the light source. Okay. So I think for most of conventional photolithography system, they use mercury xenon lamp. Okay, actually, that shows the spectrum for from this mercury xenon lamp. You have different lines, right? So basically, they use the kind of filter to select a single line of this light. Okay, so conventionally, people mostly use G line, H line, I line, but also people use the other wavelengths as well. And how you determine this line? Normally, I will discuss later, but the wavelengths of the light for photolithography determines the smallest feature you can achieve with this photolithography process. Okay, and again, these days people use deep ultraviolet lithography and extreme ultraviolet lithography to make your patterns smaller and smaller. But the problem is, if you use that kind of the different light source, then entire equipment should be redeveloped. So the equipment is a lot more expensive to enable to the photolithography with this DUV or EUV light sources. Okay, so next important component is mask. Okay, as I mentioned before, okay, so mask is the material which partially blocks the light, the light, and partially transmit the light. Okay, so important thing is again, normally people use glass or quartz for the main substrate, and then we use like a chrome layer to block the light. Okay, and basically here are shown two different masks. So mask for optical lithography is structured like this. But for X-ray lithography, you have basically the stencil mask. Okay. And how we make mask? So first of all, we use the CAD software, okay, to draw patterns. Okay, and then we buy a substrate which consists of glass or quartz with a thin layer of chrome. Okay, and also on top of that, the photoresist is coated. And then now we use either E-beam lithography or ion beam milling, or also there are the pattern generators. So basically also you use optical light to draw the patterns that you want to have. Okay, so it's also another like a photolithography step, but in this case we use not parallel process but serial process, okay, to custom write the structure you want to have. And then also you do the same procedure, developing, etching, and strip, so that you kind of partially remove some of the chrome layer on your mask substrate. Okay. So now the next important component is photoresist. Okay, so I will just show this one. So there are basically two different types of photoresist: the positive photoresist and negative the photoresist. So positive photoresist means so the exposed area, the polymer chain of the resist will be broken. While in negative photoresist, the exposed area of resist will be cross-linked, so it will become hardened compared to the surrounding areas. So after development, what happens is So again here, so this is the mask patterns. So light cannot penetrate through the black area, while light can transmit through this white area. So this means in this part of regist will be broken, so it can easily be developed by putting into a developer. And then patterns in this area will remain. So basically the patterns of the photo mask is the same as the final the structures in positive photoresist. While in if you use a negative photoresist, where photo light is exposed will be cross-linked, and where light is blocked, the resist will be removed upon development. So basically, we have opposite structures. So we call this positive resist and negative resist. Okay, so this is the kind of detailed step. This was a repetition of what I just said. Okay, so we have substrate, and then now we have some film, and we have a photoresist, we have mask. Okay, this is the light is blocked. Okay, and then this light can be transmitted through this part. For negative photoresist, the pattern is opposite. For positive photoresist, pattern is the same. I think there are many different types of commercial resist available. Okay, but those are like general characteristics for positive and negative photoresist. The first one is adhesion to silicon. For positive resist, adhesion to silicon is kind of it's not really good. Okay, and I mean also the adhesion to silicon oxide also is not really good. Okay, and then now the normal developer is based on the water. Okay, and then the developer process window is pretty small. And also we have the residue. When you use positive photoresist, we can remove the residual photoresist pretty well. So we don't have a lot of residues. So while when we use negative photoresist, I think to remove this residual photoresist is a big issue. In particular, when you use the resist like SU8, it's very difficult to remove this SU8 after the process. Yes, but for example, positive resist, you just put it into developer and it's gone. So it's possible, but you need more expensive equipment to remove. Oh, sorry, you remove the negative. Okay. Okay, and also when you plan to do the lift-off process, so lift-off process means after you make a pattern using photolithography, you want to deposit metals, and then now you want to remove the residual photoresist to make a metal patterns. And basically, you can do this with positive resist. And for negative resist, you can also do that, but also again, the issue is how we can remove the resist residues after the process. Okay, and then also phenols is pretty higher for positive resist, but it's okay for negative resist. And plasma etching resistance is also good for positive resist and not very good for negative resist, and so on and so on. So when you are to choose a resist material, you have to really consider those aspects, okay, and then to pick the right one. So now how we apply the photoresist onto substrate. For most cases, we use spin coating. So we have you first dispense the photoresist onto silicon substrate, and then you spin. And this curve shows film thickness as a function of the spin process. So as you can expect, as you spin faster, I think the final thickness of photoresist will be lower. For now, why the thickness of photoresist is important? There are two factors. One is whether how thick structures you need for your application. That is one thing. And another thing is the thickness of photoresist will affect the smallest feature, so the resolution of your photolithography process. Okay, so to determine the right thickness for the photolithography is very, very critical for photolithography process. So now, once we spin coat the photoresist and then put the mask, and then the next step is the exposure. The exposure process means we just shine light through the mask onto the substrate coated with the photoresist. Okay, so overall there are 3 different exposure systems. So the first one is contact with method. You use contact aligner or proximity aligner or projection aligner. Okay, so contact aligner is simply you make your mask in contact with the photoresist layer. Okay, while in proximity aligner, there are some gaps between the mask and photoresist layer. And for the projection aligner, basically between the photomask and your substrate, you have additional optics. Okay, so now what is the pros and cons? The first one is for contact aligner. Okay, normally you have like a one-to-one pattern transfer from your mask to photoresist. Okay, but what is the disadvantage? So basically, your mask can be damaged or contaminated, okay, by this contact. So normally the lifetime of your mask is significantly lower when you use the contact method for photolithography. Okay, but of course, if you use the proximity aligner, then of course now because you don't have intimate contact, basically you have some diffraction between this photomask and photoresist layer, so which will kind of worsen the resolution of your photolithography process. Okay, and then for projection aligner, the good thing is the size of pattern you can produce in your photoresist layer is not one-to-one match. Depending on the optics you use, you can make it smaller. Okay, but the equipment cost to enable this projection photolithography is extremely expensive compared to the other 2. Okay, so normally for most cases, if you go to most micro fab, they don't have this one. They just use either contact aligner or proximity aligner. Okay, but in the company producing microchips like Samsung Electronics, they have enough money to buy this aligner, so they just use their best equipment to produce their products. Okay, so now as I mentioned before, the resolution depends on many factors. Okay, so for example, the diffraction of the light at the edge of the mask, or whether your substrate is kind of uniformly coated and uniform thickness is flat, or whether there is any dust or debris between wafer and mask. Or also, as I mentioned before, the smallest feature size can depend on the ridge thickness as well. Also the wavelengths. Okay, so overall, the resolution in contact mode photolithography is given with this form. This is very approximate formula. So resolution is a function of lambda, which is the wavelength of your light, okay, and S, the gap between the mask and substrate, and Z is the thickness of the ridges. Okay, so now we want to have a smaller feature, smaller resolutions, right? In order to make the R smaller, what we need to do? First of all, we need to use light with a smaller wavelength, right? And then also we need to make the gap smaller. So also for contact mode, the gap should be 0. And also the thickness, okay? The thickness of your ridges should be lower to improve the resolution of your feature size. So again, we can improve resolution by reducing wavelengths, okay, mask substrate gap, and reduce thickness. Okay, so now how we align mask on the substrate. So basically we use so-called mask aligner. So normally in the photo mask, okay, we have so-called alignment mark here. Okay, so I think the picture shows, so basically here they have like a microscope here. So what they are doing is they put photo mask on top of substrate, and then they, using the microscope, they see from the top to bottom, and then try to align two different mask patterns together. Okay, so with this method, you can have the alignment better than around 1 micrometer. So if you want to improve this alignment accuracy, then these days people are using like interferometer method. So now we have to. So once you put mask onto the substrate, then we have to determine the exposure time. Okay, so exposure time is basically the dose divided by power. So power means the power of your light source. Okay, normally that varies with wavelengths. And dose is basically the properties of your resist. So which will be given by your the vendor of the resist. So they will determine how much energy you need to completely modify your resist. Okay, with a certain light over certain wavelengths. So now you can determine exposure time by dose divided by the power. Okay, so again, now that curve also shows the exposure energy as a function of film thickness. So you have to also think about when you determine the dose, also you have to think about the thickness of your photoresist layer as well. So now, after you expose, okay, your resist by the light, and then you do the development. So it means you just remove, for the negative photoresist, you remove unexposed area, while for positive photoresist, you remove exposed area of your resist. Okay, but depending on the exposure condition and also development condition, you can have different side, the sideward profile. Okay, so of course, ideally we want to have vertical wall, but purposely some people want to have overcut, and some people want to have undercut. For example, if you want to do the metal lift-off process, actually undercut structure is preferred. And if you want to make like the mold insert for molding process, basically slight undercut is preferred to facilitate the demolding process. Okay, so basically so how we can kind of change the sidewall profile? You can do it by changing the dose. So if you use a higher dose, and then basically you will have undercut and medium dose, and that is ideal, and low dose, and then you may have this undercut. Okay, and I just mentioned also the baking process is pretty important. So there are 3 different bakings. So soft baking, post-exposure baking before development, and hard baking after development. And each has different purposes, as I slightly mentioned before. So soft baking means simply after spin coating, we want to make your photoresist layer partially hardened, okay, by removing the solvent. Okay, and post-exposure bake, normally it's kind of optional, okay, but normally that is good for when we use negative photoresist. Okay, and but one downside is if you just I think the post-exposure baking is it helps to kind of reduce the amount of cracks and delamination formed in this negative photoresist. And hard baking after development, okay, you try to cure kind of expose the resist polymers, okay, so which will improve structural stability and etching resistance. And in case of SU8, normally you use around 140 degrees Celsius to 200 degrees Celsius for like 20 to 30 minutes. And okay, so I will just skip this one. And you know, the most of photolithography is done in the clean room. Okay, the reason is because as you can easily expect, if there's any like a small dust, okay, involved in this process, then they can kind of damage your final product. Okay, so basically, the clean room class is determined by the size of the size and number of particles, so contaminated kind of dust particles existing in the room. Okay, so you can for most photolithography you can do when in the classroom class 1000 clean room. Okay, but if you want to really make a pattern down to like sub 100 nanometer or sub 10 nanometer, now you have to go down to 100 or plus 10 clean room. Okay, so now the last part is what we can do once we do make patterns with photolithography. Okay, the first thing we can do is normally we transfer the patterns, resist patterns into somewhere else. Okay, so for example, in this case, you know, we can make the mold insert for like injection molding or hot embossing by after photolithography we do the electroplating. Okay, so basically we overplate this metal layer from this photolithographed the structures, and then after we remove the resist, we can have kind of negative patterns in these metals, and we can use this as a mold insert for either injection molding or photolithography. Yes. And then also, you know, you can also modify the process like this. Okay, so I mean, if you just do the exposure at the tilted angles, then you can make like nice structures. And people use those structures to mostly for optical applications. Okay, so I just tried to give you some important, the general process of photolithography and important components that you need to understand to accomplish that process. Okay, any questions? Yes. Oh, sorry? Alternative to silicon? I think, again, I mean,